Flashing means
He's ready.
now you're good.
Okay, great. All right, well, good morning, everyone, and Happy New Year. Happy 2023. Hope everyone enjoyed the holidays. Eager to start our work in the new year, pick up where we left off, and first call to order the meeting of the EDC on January 6th. And first order on our agenda is approval of our draft meeting minutes from our December meeting, which Sean had distributed last week, I believe. So if anyone had any catches or comments, please share those. Otherwise, I'd entertain a motion to approve. So moved. Second? Great. All in favor?
Aye.
Great. Any opposed? Okay, thanks, everybody. First working group update, we've got our business retention and expansion update, which I'll let Bob run with to start.
Sure. Not a whole lot to update other than the survey is public. It's on the website, city website. Everyone here has seen it. We discussed it last month. And we haven't met as a group yet to discuss the next steps, but we'll do that after our retreat at the end of the month. So I'm sure we'll have more feedback after that session. So if you have any other comments or suggestions or whatever, beforehand, we're all ears.
Alan, anything to add?
No, other than if anyone has not seen it, a press release was put out by the city announcing the availability of that survey.
Yeah.
Great.
I think Stephanie and Sean, and I don't know whether you were part of it, Bob, but I thought this was a great summary of taking that massive amount of data and breaking it down into...
Yeah, I can't take any credit for that.
Just keep your mouth shut.
So, good suggestion last month, Tom, for a report out on that. I agree. I think it was very well done. Pretty dense document. Good to have that information out there, and we'll talk about whether presenting to the council would be an appropriate next step for this dialogue. But we can talk about that at our retreat later this month. So next on our agenda would be our Land Use Committee liaison, which is now Bob. I don't know, have you guys met since we had our December meeting?
No, I haven't been to a meeting yet.
Okay.
So I really have nothing to report.
I can tell you that Land Use Chair Moreau has canceled the December and January meetings, waiting for the Housing Navigator position to be filled and to start. So they won't meet again until early February, is my understanding.
Okay.
I'm meeting with Sarah next week. She's going to brief me on it and bring me up to date. So,
Perfect. Okay, great. So that brings us to our council update for the month. I know quieter December than months past.
Yeah, it seems like a long time ago, but and I think the important things were that we did have a final reading on a couple ordinances pertaining to the fire and building codes. They were updated and to make them consistent with state codes, national and state codes. We've improved the language of them to make it a little easier to read and understand, hopefully. I personally haven't gotten any feedback, but I guess I had one person say, a contractor say to me that it's better. So, and I think we've seen that in the inspection department as well.
Great.
We're planning a public hearing on the MAC on 1/9, I think, and we'll be talking about that. Sherburne School on the 12th. And then the council is planning a retreat in February at some point to, review our goals, see where we are, make any corrections, and move forward. So,
Great.
I don't know if you have any more.
I would just add that we are beginning the CIP process, the capital improvement plan process, which then will lead us into the budget. So I think if anyone here put in any suggestions, and also the community at large, as we whittle down and see what changes our community is looking for.
If I can, the public hearing for the CIP in front of the council, I'm sorry, not a public hearing, a work session, will be January 18th.
And so for the CIP, what time frame is that covering? Is that starting fiscal year or July of '23 through the next 2 years, or is it a longer term?
It will be fiscal years '24, which starts this July 1st, through '29. So it's a 6-year cycle that pushes out every year.
And are there any, from the council's perspective, any economic development facing items that would be helpful to have input from this group on that are up for consideration, or is that going to follow the work session?
That will follow the work session.
It's a good question, though.
Great. So the McIntyre on 1/9 and Sherburne School on the 12th?
Yes.
For public input? Great. Okay, good. So thank you for that. And that brings us then to Ben for our collaborative update for the month.
Yeah, good morning. I'll be fairly brief because I want to provide as much time to Craig in the KHA presentation as possible. I think the big thing for us is that we are entering a strategic planning process. That process is just getting kind of teed up now with the committee putting the process together, and they'll meet for the first time next week. So that looks like a 6-month, 7-month process for us. It'd be the first time in 5 years that we've gone through this exercise. So it's a good time for us with relatively new leadership and some new staff members and team members. So we're excited about that process, and I think that's going to really shape how the organization develops over the next couple of years. And I'm excited about some new ideas. We've long had a 501c3 charity arm of the chamber that's been largely dormant for the last 10, 15 years. And we really are going to look at that hard and see if there's some grant opportunities that we're missing out on through that organization, and see if we can be more impactful in the areas of workforce development and affordable housing and things like that. So we're excited about that. So that's all I have.
Okay, thank you. All right, so that's the bulk of our standing agenda. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome Craig Welch from the Portsmouth Housing Authority, as well as your guest. But if you'd like to walk us through any high-level updates you have on the organization, state of the state for housing, in particular, an upcoming project I think we may be hearing about.
Yep, there's a lot going on, and so thanks for having me. I think I have to introduce myself to Andrew. I'm not sure that, forgive me if we have, I'm not sure that we met, but it's fun to be in a room like this because I don't have to introduce myself to anybody else, because everybody's been, doing so much in town over the 15 years that I've been here, too. So nice to see a lot of familiar faces anyway. And I was here 5 years ago, probably had to be while we were just getting going on Ruth Lou and Griffin Place. Obviously, I think we did 11 public presentations, and EDC wasn't a required one, but of course, what the work that we're doing with workforce housing is really impacting your businesses. For the business community here, I have read your business retention and study report, and certainly the biggest thing that everybody is having problems with is hiring employees, and the biggest parts about that is housing here. So I'm excited about that. I'm actually seeing the if you go to the next slide. When I was putting this presentation together yesterday, I was looking at this aerial of Ruth's Place since it was finished in June of 2022, and I was remembering that when we were going through the land use process and talking about design and people really being afraid of what affordable housing design is, that I used to say, I'm going to be able to see this from my bedroom. And at this time of year, just as all the leaves fall off the trees, I actually can. I can't in the summertime, but I do live kind of down in the neighborhood somewhat. But so I'll start with the success that we've had there. As you know, this was a huge achievement, I think, for the city of Portsmouth. There's nothing quite like it in and around the region, and we've won some awards, and I think there's more coming our way. This was, I had actually commissioned a study, if you've been in town long enough, there was a brown building that was kind of in between, a 5,000 square foot building that was in between Feaster and this parking lot that became Roost Place. And I first did a little study with NIA in October of 2014. And it was off and on for a little while with that seller, but one thing, to always be reminded is how long these things take. And one of the reasons why we're 20 to 30,000 units underbuilt in the state of New Hampshire with affordable housing, with the economy that we have and with the population we have and the job growth that's expected. One reason why the production has been or the production is so low is because it just takes a lot of time. And it shouldn't have to take that much time, but this was, I could say 8 years, I could say 6 years. I've usually been saying a 6-year process. As you know, in the 6 years from when we spent $16 million and to build 64 units of workforce housing, we lost as many housing units in that time period. So even though this is the largest expansion of permanently affordable housing in the city in almost a half century, that we're still going backwards after that. But it is a great, has been a great achievement. We were very pleased, and forgive me, I need to introduce myself to Andrew, but Mark's not that case. Mark Lentz is our facilities director and was the guy for the Portsmouth Housing Authority on site here through that construction project and a little bit more with the development. So he's my guy to take this from here. So Mark's been with us how long?
Almost 3 years.
Yeah. So, and Mark was sort of forwarding this while we had, I think, over 100 little projects, capital projects, and we own $100 million worth of real estate value portfolio in the city already. So that's what Mark does. So forgive me for
That's all right.
You're sitting out of my sight. But yeah. So back to, I had said that the Roost Place was the largest expansion of permanently affordable housing in the city in almost 50 years. It's the largest project of its kind in New Hampshire, outside of our two largest cities, outside of Manchester and Nashua. 64 units. It's the largest permanently affordable housing that's been built in the last decade. It's a LEED Gold certified building. We were very pleased just to be awarded the U.S. Green Building Council Building of the Year. We were the highest scoring LEED project in New Hampshire in 2022. And so Mark and I were happy to accept that award, and it's a terrific credential that demonstrates our commitment to energy and energy efficiency. We're trying to figure out, we're slowly figuring out how to do that with a 50-year-old public housing inventory too. But we're aspirational with Roost Place, and we want to be more aspirational next. With either a passive house or net zero type of development. Opened in 2022. I'll read what I wrote. LEED Gold certified. One thing that makes it very unique is being in a walkable urban community. We think we can demonstrate. We have a pretty special downtown, but to do downtown development that's walkable to jobs like this was a unique feature of how this works. Over 500 people applied when we first started taking invitations, and there's still 280 of those that are currently on the wait list in Portsmouth, so that's demonstrating the demand for this. We thank Ben for the Building Better Community Award that we were We were awarded in 2022 in the Visionary Leadership Award from the Workforce Housing Coalition. So we've got a lot to talk about and a lot to be really proud about here. How about the next slide? Just for your guys' sake, 93 people now live there. 21 are kids. I was surprised at that number, but I don't know why. I didn't think otherwise, but what a terrific place to be a kid. You can walk to all 3 schools you'll ever go to. You have huge recreational facilities right outside your door, world-class library. It's really, these kids are loving it. These units are small, but they're loving it. 7 city employees so far. Kevin, your IT guy that just came in to start this is one of them, actually. And I don't know where Kevin was commuting from before, but for a lot of people that are here right now who are working in the city and commuting, that it's a life changer to be here, 6 restaurants, 6 nonprofits, 4 school department, 4 hotels, 3 salons, 2 grocery stores, 2 jewelry stores, and I often add when I've said that list that also someone from FedEx and from UPS, in case you need to get anything there overnight, we'll find a way to do it. So that's the final census of the fully occupied Ruth Lou Griffin Place. Phil introduced me as from the PHA. That's true. The Portsmouth Housing Authority was founded in 1953 by the city of Portsmouth. The only connection we have with the city, we don't get any money from the city, and we're not a city department. But the only connection we have is that the mayor appoints our board, and so that's the Portsmouth Housing Authority, and it was formed really to build the first 6 public housing properties in Portsmouth. Gosling in 1959, Woodbury, State, and Pleasant in the mid-'60s, Feaster finished in 1970, and Margeson in 1973. Be the last one and the largest one. And so the other, but I also have another board. So we also have a 501c3 nonprofit. And the reason why that was created was when the Tax Reform Act of 1996 created this low-income housing tax credit financing tool for low-income housing, and so that's when we formed PHA Housing Development Limited. So you will sometimes, when this is going through the process, you will sometimes see that because that is going to be the sponsor of the development. There's some inside baseball. We did a community survey. I guess I can go back and I could pass out the market study. This in 2022, we commissioned a market study, a housing market study for the city of Portsmouth. So in between planning directors, the city didn't have to do one, which they were
Very appreciative.
we were going to split the cost, but I said, well, no, we'll pick up the tab. The community survey was done by RKG Associates. They spent a lot of time reviewing data and talking to people and developers and stuff in town, but one of the great, and a lot of data that's in there. Part of it was a community survey. He said, well, it's really hard to do community surveys. It's hard to get people to respond. I said, trust me. This is the city of Portsmouth. Trust me that and we had 600 responses to that. And it was just the city of Portsmouth. The Rockingham County Planning Commission is also doing their own study. So we did this just for the city of Portsmouth. And I'll go through some of those key findings. But one thing that is a big part of the conversation is oftentimes what's workforce housing and how much do we need? And how these things go with government or with anything is that you keep going back. You have these conversations that are important, but I just like to say that we have over-legislated. We're not going to re-legislate that. I can show you articles from the PHA that talks about the lack of affordable housing in the 70s and 80s. It's been a problem for decades. It's getting worse right now. But this is complicated enough to build this stuff and to go through that kind of process and all the communicating that we want to do. So I just like to say, we have a workforce housing problem. We don't need to talk about it anymore. We can show you data. We can show you all kinds of stuff. Just in the city of Portsmouth, going from the bottom of the 2008 master plan was a lot about it. There was a 2008 Blue Ribbon Commission formed on housing. There's a 2017 our own strategic plan. The Portsmouth Listen Study Circle, which happened around the same time, talks about the importance. The 2016 Blue Ribbon Commission that formed the housing policy for the city. I used to cite when I talked about this, your 2017 report. That was in my stump speech all the time as, talking about this need. This housing needs assessment that I just passed around, and it's also a really big part of the 2025 master plan. So it's a very well-documented issue. It was probably the biggest issue in this last campaign, I think, and so there is a workforce housing problem, and it's well-documented in the city. Go ahead. One of the main findings of the market study are as follows. Most of the people, or 40% of the people who live in Portsmouth now are cost burdened. That's defined as people who are paying 30% more of their income on rent. 15% are extremely so. They're extremely cost burdened, and it doesn't leave a lot of disposable income when you're low income already and paying that kind of. So when people talk about new affordable housing, I often talk about people coming into the city, and what I want to tell you is that there's a lot of people now that are feeling this problem and interested in this. And of course, even if you do commute in the city, your cost is way up because it's getting more expensive to commute. There's a supply and demand myth, according to the report. It's conventional wisdom that there's supply and demand, and if you just make housing development easier, multifamily housing development easier, then you're going to have more housing, and the more housing you have, the more demand, and so the rents are going to be affordable. That's a complete myth. That doesn't happen. The 2,000 housing units that the private market has built over the last 10 years or 8 years in Portsmouth has not moved the needle at all and is not likely to move the needle. Another reason why the Portsmouth Housing Authority is a nonprofit, local nonprofit real estate developer it's important to support us and other nonprofit housing developers because we're the only ones that will cap rents to keep it permanently affordable. All this other housing is not creating any affordable housing, even though that's what often says. Go ahead. Income ranges. Study basically says that half of the demand is going to be for people who are at or below 80% of the area median income. Using low-income housing tax credits, 80% is actually the maximum allowed with the tax credit project. So we can help all of those. Majority of the survey respondents cited workforce housing, low-income housing, housing for people experiencing homelessness as very important to deal with in the city. Go ahead. Employment sectors, the people in the survey talked about retail, hospitality, food service, creative economy, municipal employees, and first responders as the people that we would most likely want to have in the community and are having a challenge living here. Some evidence that household size is increasing in Portsmouth despite all these 2 bedrooms that have been built in the rental market, but household size is increasing, and that's going to make the case for the next thing we build to have some more 3-bedroom units. Private market's not doing that, so that's what the data has. That is a reason for that. But then anecdotally, the 3 bedrooms at West End Yards ended up. A few of them ended up going first, and so with the new workforce housing project up in York, all the 3 bedrooms went first. So that's what we're going to do. Accessibility is a huge thing in Portsmouth. 60% of our housing stock, or the majority of our housing stock, was built before 1960, and I get calls all the time. Hi, Craig, Mom fell. She's at Edgewood Center in rehab, and she's going to come home soon. And do you have any apartments? Because she can't get up to her bedroom in her house anymore. And so a lot of accessibility issues in older buildings. So a big demand for that, not just for people who are in wheelchairs and need that, but I tell my staff, if you want to see what it's like being an elderly person trying to get around, just start shuffling everywhere. And it's a totally different world when you feel all kinds of stuff when you shuffle. We have a lot of people that shuffle and could use one-story living, and there's also some federal loans and some restrictions on properties in Portsmouth now that are affordable housing properties that are not owned by us. Osprey and Keefe House, for instance, the federal requirements on those expire after these contracts are usually 20-year contracts. So in Portsmouth before 2030, there'll be 489 affordable units that are going to be much more advantageous for that owner to turn into market rate housing when those expire.
Craig, there's no incentive for that owner to keep them at that rate, correct?
They could get a new Section 8 voucher or renew that voucher. Yeah, I mean, there's still possibilities in that.
Yeah.
And I don't know what kind of instrument that the city could use, how much enabling, I haven't looked into it enough, how much enabling legislation there is to be able to do some kind of property tax break for these things as a way to support it and preserve it, because again, it took 6 years and $16 million to build 64 units, so you've got a challenge. So the mayor started talking about the future of the Sherburne School. It was a part of the dialogue. I don't know how long people have been talking about the fact that that building has outlived its, with the kind of deferred maintenance it has. It's not going to make economic sense to continue that, and of course, all of a sudden, owning the community campus made that a no-brainer. So we're talking about now the disposition of that site and turning it into housing, just like we've done before with city-owned property, with the Atlantic Heights School with its 30 units of senior housing, Lafayette School, our smallest, where there's 10 units of senior housing, and the Connors Cottage next door, which is 20 units of senior housing. So it's kind of in our sweet spot to do something like this. Currently owned by the city of Portsmouth, so there's some disposition process that is going to need to be gone through. But as a site, it's a fabulous site. It's a little loud, but otherwise, it's as easy to get on and off the highway as there's little traffic impact that anything could really have. I mean, any other property I could see. If people living close to where they work is very important the way we see it, and so this would actually be the closest housing to Pease, and there is a bike path through Panaway Manor that goes right to C&J Trailways, which is a direct Boston to New York, or otherwise, as I said, and Coast Bus. And there's some huge employers out there, too, as you know, Highliner, Northeast Credit Union, the hospital, all of those. What's in it? So right now, I've been authorized to spend $150,000 on due diligence activities, and we're working very fast to do that because primarily because there's a I can talk about the deadline afterwards, but we have just hired an architect just last week and kicked off that relationship this Wednesday. And the first part of what they're going to do is do a master plan for the site that we hope to have back by the end of February. And we're doing that at the city is not doing any of this, isn't required, hasn't asked us, but when the idea of putting affordable housing out there, we said, well, we'll give us a right of entry and we'll start to study it and come up, just like the city would if the city were developing it, but we're doing that on our dime. And so there's a lot to talk about, and if we want to move quickly, we've got to make some decisions about the program, the density, how many units is what people mostly ask, and how it will work, how a project would be financed and work in phases. Like I said before, one of the findings in your report was finding employees, so a housing issue. That slide's kind of out of order. Ruth Lou and Griffin Place was awarded a very scarce resource in the low-income housing tax credits that are distributed annually. That brought $8 million in equity into housing investment in the city of Portsmouth. So that was a big win just to start. These tax credits are hard to get. They're hard to get, and we'd like to, the date that we have in mind is August of 2023, when the next round of tax credit applications are due. The threshold criteria for winning these tax credits is that we have permits. That's a really fast thing to do in Portsmouth, but at the same time, one thing we want to prove to everybody is that this doesn't have to take forever. We can be thoughtful and move it along, but there's land use a lot to do, but we could do it, and right now we're focused on getting that done by August 2023. If you look at the calendar and mark the days, there's a lot that has to happen in order for us to pull that off. Otherwise, it will be another year before we could start anything out here. All right, go to the next one. So, summary, we're a local nonprofit developer and owner. We build housing. We have 668 units of housing in the city. We're the largest landlord by a long shot, and all of our housing is permanently affordable. Supports a diverse economy. I could talk about how tax credits work forever, and high land costs in Portsmouth obviously is a big thing, and now we've got an opportunity with some land that we already own and doesn't have any debt on to do something here. I think that was the end. Questions?
Fantastic.
Yeah.
No, thank you, Craig. You covered an incredible amount of ground there. Well done, I think. Lots to digest and talk about, but open it up to the group for specific questions, either on kind of the intro and workforce housing in general or on the project.
And I wasn't looking at my watch, so forgive me if I went way longer than the 15 minutes.
That's perfect.
I have two questions, Mr. Chairman. Putting you on the spot a little bit, Craig and Mark, doing the math, that was $250,000 a unit for Ruth's Place. Is that, I guess I'm polling people in the room, including David Choate, is that the going rate? Was that how did you find that $250,000 per unit cost?
It's all, it's relative. The only person, David's been following this stuff since the, early 20s, David?
1920s.
1820s, all right. I used to work for David, so we go way back, and he has been working on this issue for a long time. And then your question was...
Oh, the question was, how does that fall in line with other per unit development costs that have taken place recently?
I don't know what the current limit is at the New Hampshire Housing Finance Authority, but when they give tax credits, there is a cap on TDC, total development cost. So that was, that's a budget that we're always trying to hit. This is one reason why the Sherburne School building itself will be, not impossible, but really difficult to turn into housing, that building, which is a part of it. So I think it's amazing that actually that building itself costs $12 million to build. It's a high quality building, but
Next question, if I can, and my second of two questions. The issue when the building was permitted was no parking. Have you found that the residents need or are working through the no parking?
that was a huge thing. In fact, the chamber, Val Rochon wrote one of our first letters of support. Says, we support this 100%, but I'm going to get in trouble because parking, and because it's a choice that communities have to make. Are you going to still, continue to subsidize car ownership in 2023 and build a lot of parking in town? Even in the survey, there were several people that said about Portsmouth, there's too much traffic and not enough parking. Well, if you build more parking, there's going to be more traffic. If you want more people driving through the middle of the city, then build more parking lots. And you know, building affordable housing is hard, and density is a huge deal, and it costs a lot of money. We were originally going to put 2 floors of parking. We're like, are we really going to spend $2 million for 25 cars, or are we going to build 18 housing units on that same footprint? Plus the fact that we just spent $25 million building a 600-car garage in Portsmouth, and I sure wish we had $25 million to leverage housing. We would be way ahead of the game if that were the case.
Great. Tom?
Just to follow up on Karen's question, Craig. When you set your criteria for selecting the applicants for the Griffin House, do you, separate from their income, do you take into consideration whether they work downtown and or they work somewhere, you know, where they would have to have a car? Is that actually part of the defined criteria?
It was, we didn't think it really could happen because of how fair housing rules work. Currently, we have preferences at the Portsmouth Housing Authority for all of our properties for being elderly, disabled, to either being elderly or disabled. You get some points for being a veteran, but the biggest point category is that you live in the city of Portsmouth. That they don't approve that kind of stuff anymore because of disparate impact rules. But we did get an attorney's opinion because this is what we were trying to do, right? So we did get a legal opinion, and New Hampshire Housing Finance Authority did approve us to give a preference to people that work in Portsmouth, not live in Portsmouth, because that's what we were trying to do. And that's why so many people who work downtown, I just talked to a kid, Adam, over there the other day. He said, I'm so happy I was able to sell my car, the cost of that car. I walked to Hannaford to work, and I just love it, you know, and the 41 bus stops right outside. And just to correct, we didn't have no parking, but we did have to ask for a lot of parking relief, a conditional use permit for a lot of parking relief. So it's it's just under that threshold in order to do it. Side anecdote on why, you know, policy around this kind of stuff has other consequences. The hallways in Bruce Place are a little bit wider than they need to be because we had to make the units a little bit smaller in order for them to count as micro units in the city ordinance. So how silly is that, right? It wasn't much, but you know, there's consequences to trying to put in public policy for this kind of stuff.
Great. Ben?
Craig, could you share a little bit about the partnership with Great Bay Community College in Griffin Place and some of the tuition? There's a discount, I understand, on rent or tuition if they're a Great Bay Community College student.
Right. We have now been awarded a $250,000 grant from the Federal Home Loan Bank of Boston to do an education incentive program, kind of along with the workforce housing theme. That we've now got some funding, and we'd love to see how it ends up going, to give a rent reduction of $100 or $200 a month if you're enrolled in some kind of education, a certificate program, cosmetology school, a 4-year program, whatever it is. And of course, Great Bay is going to be a great partner in doing that, and we'll have some stuff that'll actually be going on the property with Great Bay counselors and that kind of stuff, trying to get people enrolled. The first ask around, there was about 50%. You know, this would be successful if we had 5 people end up enrolling at Great Bay, or it incentivizes them to go back to work and build assets. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, yes, thank you.
Okay. Yeah, so we're about to announce that and be able to start offering that in January, and it's brand new. Doing something like that is brand new.
Great.
Craig, can you differentiate for us and define a little bit the difference between the workforce housing component, like Ruth's Place, and what you're considering at Sherburne School versus the rest of your housing stock relative to the income levels and whom actually resides in the properties?
Right. That's a great question. We answered. I actually really believe that defining it slows the conversation down. Is it, well, this is low-income housing, not workforce housing, or this is workforce housing, not Section 8 housing. It depends on those the people's definitions around that are all over the place. What is regulated on a federal level is the income levels. People are often surprised that to be qualified for public housing, it's 80%. You need to make under 80% of the area median income, and that our other tax credit properties are actually lower than that. You have to make under 60% of the area median income because people have an idea of what public housing is, and the fact is that almost 85% of them are under 30% of the area median income. They are the lowest income people in our community. So, but you can go up to you can go up to, let me tell you specifically, HUD Rochester fair market rent is up to 80% is $62,600. In order to get into Ruth's Place as an individual, you had to make less than that. So people are kind of surprised that there's people who have this kind of income, but that's where they qualify. And there's a lot of people in that category who can't live or have a lot of trouble living in Portsmouth. It doesn't go up a lot for a two-person family. It's $71,000 for a two-person family is the maximum income limit in New Hampshire. And then we actually have 3 different bands, and the rents are all based on paying 30% of your income in rent below what's considered cost burdened. And there's a bunch of little tricks around how all that works, but it's basically 3 bands. Ruth's Place, we decided to go under 70%, but we could go up to a maximum of 80%, 60%, and then under 30% are three different rents. All based on
And you think about the same kind of spread at the Sherburne School?
The Sherburne School, the program we're envisioning now and has demand for is workforce housing. A lot of people ask for age-restricted housing, and that's tougher with tax credits, plus the fact that I think we're more successful with mixed communities rather than having exclusive senior housing. What the demand is for is housing that's accessible, but not necessarily, well, as you said, Did that answer your question?
It did. Yeah, that's good. That's it. Great. Thanks.
Tom, you had a follow-up?
Another question. So you opened your remarks by saying that during the 6 to 8 years that it took to put up the Griffin House, that the city lost more housing, more affordable housing than is in that building. Is that, when you calculated that, did you simply do that based upon a survey of what rents were going for, or is that solely related to housing that's under some type of a subsidy program going offline?
Right. 2 different things, but the biggest example of what specifically I was talking about is what's called these expiring use properties. Rockland Street, the Portsmouth Apartments on the corner of Rockland Street and Miller, is a 48-unit building that had one of these Section 8, these 20-year Section 8 contracts. And it was ending, that contract was ending, and the owner actually decided to sell the building. We tried to buy the building, but we got somebody with a 1031 exchange and a ton of cash. They just came in and paid it. We couldn't do that, and arguably overpaid. But then that owner did not want to renew the Section 8 contract. So in 60 days, we lost 48 units. as another example. The story that you hear over and over again is that I, have this place to rent, the mom died, now they want to sell the property. The people that just bought the property want to raise my rent $600 a month. That's the story you hear all the time. That's the people who are living in Ruth's Place and really thankful. But so that's part of it too. When things are condoed, as we gentrify, we're losing naturally occurring affordable housing as well. That I don't have the data on, but these expiring use properties we do.
Great question.
Practically speaking, if money weren't an issue, wouldn't that be lovely? What could you do in the area? I mean, you read all the time that we're constrained by land cost, we're constrained by available space, buildings, et cetera. If $50 million or $100 million just kind of went thump outside the door at PHA at some point, what could you practically do in the next 5 to 10 years, do you think?
Well, I worked for David Choate for a while, so I see opportunities everywhere. I see development opportunities everywhere because I was doing commercial real estate. But one big restriction on the tax credit program that's really unfortunate in New Hampshire is that the sweet spot for building tax credit housing or workforce housing is a 40-unit building. Most of the stuff that gets built is in and around 40 units because of how that tax credit financing works. So this is what we're trying to deal with now is the constraint of the tax credits to do, like we could do easily 80 units at Sherburne School in 2 40-unit phases. But the site, I think, can hold 160 units. We're in a housing crisis. You have one piece of land that the city owns and owns outright. So just like we kept saying downtown over and over again, let's go get as many units as we can and still have a thoughtfully defined site. So there's a constraint on the money side too. There is some other ways to do it with joint ventures. There's 2 different kinds of tax credits that we could put together. So there is a way to do something all in one phase that's a bigger project, but just the way that structure, we do get constrained. And how many could we build? We've studied some other city-owned land in a couple different areas of the city. The one I think that would be easiest to develop would be Atlantic Heights on Bedford Way. There's a big field in front of the Atlantic Heights School. Not a big field, but enough to, if it were going to be senior housing, we could put another 40 units of senior housing like that out there. Again, the problem with the tax credits is that you're not eligible for new tax credits, and this is a big part of the Sherburne thing too about what we're trying to do. But you're not eligible for the tax credits until you lease up a project that you've already built, right? So if we don't get Sherburne done, we want to pivot to something else. That has that kind of consequences.
Craig, most of your housing stock is, what, 30, 40 years old?
Yeah, 50.
50, yeah. What are some of the opportunities to redevelop or reimagine some of the existing projects that you have, whether it's
That's
Meadows or some of the others?
That's a great thought. There is a new tool with HUD that I could go and explain, but not worth it. But that would give us title to these properties unencumbered by HUD. That would also give the opportunity to refinance, redevelop, or reposition any of our properties. The one, when we first asked that question, it was like, we own a parking lot downtown. Let's do something there. That's amazing. But we also, with the Workforce Housing Coalition, did a charrette for Gosling Meadows if we really wanted to. And we pushed that site. It's 11 acres of land, also close to Pease and walkable to thousands of jobs. Some people will say that's a terrible use for that property. It's on an island. But After that charrette, we believe that we could double the amount of units out there. It's 124 family units built in 1959 and redeveloped. Could be another project, and that could be next. And that planning for that will be contemporaneous with Sherburne, is what I expect.
Assistant Mayor, you had a question?
Thank you. We saw some, I would say, a small amount of community resistance when we look at Ruth Griffin Place. Is that something you anticipate for Sherburne School? And also, how can supporters, whether that be city level, people on commissions, or just overall community support, help you move along this process?
Yeah. The other thing I like to say when I talk about this and when I talk about housing is that all the people that like to sit in a room and talk about workforce housing and the importance of it. I mean, you show the film that they showed. There's a lot of people that come to something like that. But when it's time to show up, you've got to show up. You know, you've got to show up, and you've got to have some advocates that get other people to show up, which we did. Which we turned out last time. I mean, obviously we were successful, and the opposition wasn't. It wasn't. What's a crime is that it took two people a few $100s to stop a project and cost it another $1 million. A nonprofit housing developer cost $1 million. The rents are all higher because we lost 1.5 years in court with something that was completely frivolous. So anything can go wrong. But I think it has incredibly low traffic impact. And I'll knock on all the doors. I mean, I'll do the work to make sure that people are informed. I actually met with one of the abutters yesterday and talked to them about what we're doing. I spoke with Bob Lister. This is the Lister Academy. And I spoke with Bob Lister, and he confirmed. He says, I don't think you're going to have any problem at all. We've been talking about this. It's been in the newspaper. People kind of expect it. The neighbors kind of expect it. And, what kind of the property will only get better, especially if it's a mixed use, especially if the school stays some kind of community use or some kind of nonprofit, which is an important consideration. I actually walked through the property with 2 nonprofits yesterday. So it could stay as that, as instead. So it'll be cool, but who knows? Who knows? When one person or 2 people can do that, even though something like here downtown had an overwhelming amount of support, that can still happen. But that's a aside. So that's important. A letter from the chamber was important, and we had a bunch of other ones, but it was too hard to do that, and so that's what we'll want to do. To the extent that you have any official governance, either as an advisory opinion or straight up when it comes to appropriating money through the CIP or using some of this ARPA money. One thing about a phased project, obviously, is that the first phase is really expensive because all of the infrastructure, the lights, the roads, the water, the sewer, the stormwater, all has to be put in on that first phase. Of course, the city contributing to especially water sewer is not that hard because it's enterprise fund, and that doesn't make a difference. But a CIP project, we did request CIP funding for this now. We had a little bit downtown. And when I say a little bit, this was a $16 million project, and I think CIP money was $300,000 of that. But these deals are skinny, and that would help. So if that becomes a part, if at all you influence that capital budgeting process, then that's important as well. Or advocating for ARPA money. So that could be a part of what you do, too.
Thank you.
Great. Anyone else I know?
I just want to say, I've been advocating for this for several years. I think this is a great opportunity for us to leverage the ARPA funds that we have to the extent that there's still availability and to be able to leverage it into more workforce housing. And, as I've said, right, I understand from the city manager, we've used some of it to reduce the tax burdens on everyone. But at the end of the day, we're going to look back and say, what did we do with that $12 million? Right? What happened with that $12 million? We deferred some taxes, we did some, okay. Here's an opportunity for us to leverage that and do something really meaningful and create a legacy. So I just want to be on record for saying that.
Right.
Just a quick,
Jacob.
just a quick comment. I live downtown like a block away from Market Square, so I know how awesome it is to live in town. I just think you did a beautiful job with that affordable housing project. I mean, if there's more projects like that down the line, like that's fantastic. So just kind of wanted to say that.
Thank you. Thank you. It's been fun being us in town since
Yeah.
we opened this.
Yeah, I
because
mean, it's.
I hear
it's-
that.
I walk past
all
it.
the
I
time.
walk
Yeah.
through the little urban walkway to get to my car, and it's really nicely done.
Yeah. It annoys my wife, actually. He thanks me. He thanks me. All I do. And can't turn around, without that. So we really appreciate it. Yeah.
Yeah. I'll echo Jacob's comments. I look out at the project all day long from my office window. So
That's right.
Nicely done. I just had a question in terms of the phasing or the potential of the Sherburne site. Is that something, do you need to have that spelled out, or do you just need phase one of whatever units you feel like you'd be able to support when you go to apply for the credits in the 23 round, if you get that far?
Right. We want to know that up front. We've got to make some decisions because we're trying to move this along. So the first step is a master plan. So we'll take, even if there's phases, we'd like to have a site plan. There's a city process, that could include a lot of things.
So you'll have an idea at the outset on what the ultimate full composition
Right.
could be, even
Right.
if that's going to happen in
Right.
over a sequence of years because of the limitations on applying for the next
Right.
rounds until you're leased.
I mean, it's most efficient to build a single building with a double-stacked corridor and something, I mean, West End Yards looks the way it does, and that's how you can do this, is with a box. I don't get paid extra for this stuff. It's like, it's just fun for me, but it has to be interesting. We can do something, I think we can do something really interesting on energy, but not a lot of capital sources in that. And then we talked about sort of a village concept with some townhomes as a part of it, and really make it its own little village. 5 acres is pretty, it's not huge, but to do housing and, something in the, whatever ends up being the use of the Sherburne School itself, really has the potential to tie it all together. And talk about food as a component of that, as a big component of that, is really consistent with what we're doing,
Great. Anyone else?
One final, sorry. You tossed around a few numbers, and I understand that you have to go through your master plan and kind of look, but what if you had to pick a dream sweet spot number for the amount of units you would hope for that location? What would it be?
Yeah, we haven't studied it a whole lot. We went out to 5 architects, some great architects, and some did a little, preview of a site plan. One of them was 180 units, and there was a lot of paving on that site with 180 units. So we're really guessing right now, but my current wish would be to go with more density. 80 units becomes easy to do on the financing side. But with this opportunity, why do 80? There's a way, theoretically, why go
Low when you can go
why
high.
go low?
Yeah.
We don't have any, but why, if you're in a housing crisis, why not build a 10-story building? We don't have any 10-story buildings. It's a 10-story building. But think about it. Like,
Strike that from the record.
out in that location. That will not happen, by the way. That building code
Headline.
does change after 5 units, and it really stops making sense. So, but I just like to point that out. That's not what we're envisioning.
question.
Are
Counselor?
you envisioning multiple buildings in that site, or a single building?
Yeah, I mean, we're contemplating everything right now. But I would say 90% sure that this will be more than one building.
A campus?
And maybe, maybe, maybe some townhomes. There's a lot of dignity with having your own door, and to do something that is dignified. We just like downtown. We wanted to appeal to people with choice, and do something, do something nice. That's well done.
Yeah.
I say a lot of these things, by the way, and we don't really have the money to do a lot of this. But part of what we do is just go to try to find the stuff to do energy, and to kind of put it all together, work with the city.
I know one of the things the land use committee is looking at is right now we would not be allowed to build a development that kind of resembles Atlantic Heights, that has that community feel, still smaller units, most of them under 650 square feet. And so I know that it's on the top of the mind of the city too, of how we can make sure that our policies really do match, and in our land use regulations really do match what we say we want, and what we can allow you to develop or allow a nonprofit developer to do.
One thing we're anticipating, we actually have a meeting later to talk about the governance process, but what will happen, do we need to do anything with the zone? It's in a municipal zone, which is kind of a wild card, but we need, counsel on that. And if you do want to change the zone, and that's important, either creating a new zone, doing some kind of overlay district, or just changing the allowed uses in a municipal zone, those things can take a lot of time. So showing up when it's time to make a decision like that, showing up and supporting the project when there's an opportunity in a public hearing, an opportunity with a planning board or a zoning board to show up and support the project.
Ian, did you have a question? Sorry, hand. No. Okay. We're good. All right. Nothing further from the group. I know we've got public comment next. I do want to touch on our retreat and our next meeting session, but it looks like David may have had comments that he wanted to make or bring to us.
A couple of questions for Craig.
You want to
Sure.
speak to a mic? You should share a mic.
Come on over and grab.
I'll sit in Everett's seat. Okay. He won't mind. Craig, good to see you again, as always. A couple of questions, and then I'm going to make a comment, and don't take this the wrong way, Craig, but are you paying the city for the property?
The city hasn't requested
Any payment?
Any money for the property, and I think what we're anticipating is that the city do give us.
And does Housing Authority do a payment in lieu of taxes on any of its properties?
Yes, we do. Depending on whether it's public housing or our tax credit housing,
Okay.
What we pay is defined in state statute, the formula, and so we do pay taxes last year, or we do what's called a payment in lieu of taxes.
Right.
So last year we paid some $400,000 to the city, which is way lower, or lower than what we would pay as a private owner, but that's allowed under state.
So, and my next question is really to the two councilors that are on the. Why wouldn't the city do a request for proposals for this property from nonprofit and for-profit workforce housing developers and give them an opportunity to buy they would buy the property? We're doing a project in Epping with the Housing Partnership right now, where they're paying about $15,000 a unit for 60 units. So, there's money being left on the table. I'm not disputing the good work that you guys do. I'm just pointing out the obvious. And they pay a payment in lieu of taxes, which may be equivalent to what you're doing, or maybe more or less. I don't know what it is, but it just seems like you're not a city agency. Why is it fair to give you that project versus the Housing Partnership or Great Bridge Properties or Avesta or somebody else that would have an opportunity to bid on it. So that's just a question for the council, and the horse may be already out of the barn. The positive thing I wanted to say, Karen, this is more to you. Sean sits on the Comprehensive Economic Development Strategy Committee of Rockingham, and we have money available for infrastructure stuff. So you want to make sure that he gets plugged into the infrastructure piece of this, Craig, because there's money that can be gotten from the federal government for that EDA. We're doing our current SEDS programming right now, so now would be the time for Sean to put this in as a project on behalf of the city. So just to, you talk about needing money from other sources, that's the way to get.
Where is that
for the
federal?
EDA, yeah, Economic Development
Yeah.
Agency. It's all through the REDC.
Right.
Laurel's
That's what-
fiefdom over there. So anyway, just a comment I make. I'm not criticizing any. I think it's a great. Obviously, I'm a preservationist too. So reusing the Sherburne School building like the Lafayette School was done is a great outcome. I do think you're a little optimistic on your August timetable. I'm well aware, obviously, of the timetables for tax credits, but if you got to go through a rezoning and it's all stuff, good luck. That would really be an act of God with the environment we have in Portsmouth, because some of the usual suspects are going to be out there lobbying the neighbors to sue you.
Maybe, maybe not. We hope not. And your first question is an excellent one. And the city may, how the governance in the city works is not up to me. But overall, what we're trying to do and what it says in the policy is to move this stuff along. So if the city council, if there's if you want to do an RFP, we're just delaying it a year. That's fine. We're a nonprofit too, but
No, but that's a discussion that should have been had a few months ago or a year ago, whenever it is. I just, pointing out the obvious. And again, I think it's not fair to other organizations that do workforce housing not to get a shot at an opportunity in Portsmouth, which is rare, if ever, becomes available. That's all. Just a comment. I still love you.
hey, right back at you.
Great. Thanks, David. Thank you, Craig and Mark, for joining us. I think it was doing great work. Nice to see that in the flesh, so to speak, with Ruth's Place. And we'll be plugged into the conversation and stay in close communication over the course of the next few months and over the course of this year as you gear up for an application.
Well, it's cool because you got something real. It's nice to have something that brings, that's very tangible. So this is not about workforce housing or policy. It's about actual workforce housing.
Good. Well, thank you for joining.
Is there more of the meeting?
Yes, just a brief.
Okay.
You're welcome to hang around. So if David had anything else for public comment, that's next. Okay. So next on our agenda for a regular meeting would be our February 3rd meeting. So we'll stay on track for that, but we did send a couple of notes out over the holiday season asking for whether morning or afternoon would be best for a retreat with this group on January 20th. So it's the Friday after Martin Luther King, the holiday. And I heard from most folks that the afternoon would be preferable. I think Andy probably had the biggest conflict given a prior commitment. So otherwise, I think I'd like to propose that we meet at the Levinson Room at the library on January 20th from 12 to 3, if that works for everyone.
Chairperson, I will just have to leave 30 minutes early.
Okay, great. We'll try to make it a robust and quick conversation, but I think really honing in on everything we've been talking about and working through over the past year, trying to come up with some actionable items. Alan and I will work on trying to get kind of a draft agenda out, so to speak, and Sean will be working on facilitating that for us. I think key topics would include how we're approaching advocacy situations where we'll have an opportunity to speak either in general on a topic or on a particular project, so a timely discussion on that based on things we've heard recently from other groups or projects, and also this one in particular. Good to have kind of some ground rules on where we would like to be in being nimble and able to respond on those if we so choose. further honing in on our strategic efforts and partnerships, and then really drilling down on key issues, following up on BRE, all the topics we've touched upon, and maybe how we want to pivot and use the good work that working group has done, and push further into that. I think one thing we did in our last retreat pre-COVID was a kind of a future visioning and kind of a forward-looking view out on a 5-year basis. I think I would encourage folks to take that approach. I think it's been a little quieter on kind of the smart city, other than our EV discussions we've had over the course of this year, but encourage you to bring any topics and maybe include part of that in the discussion. And then, again, welcome any other, once you see what we put together next week, welcome you to suggest any additions to that, if there's any big gaps for anything that's important to this group. One thing I would like to reinvigorate in the year ahead would be our data working group. So Jacob and I have to touch base on that, and welcome any other commissioners to join on that. But I think with a delay in the revaluation also, but in terms of the budget, it's going to become something that would be meaningful to have, framing some of our other discussions and other issues we're working on over the course of the year. So stay tuned on that, but looking forward to that with this group. And then if nobody has anything further, would entertain a motion to adjourn somewhat ahead of time, but happy to touch on anything else if someone has something they'd like to bring up. But been a quieter month behind us, and will be a busy month ahead, and we're asking for some time later this month, so give you 15 minutes back if no one has anything further.
So moved.
Second. Great. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.